fourth critical choice I made was to create community, and then belonging. And then I figured out, well, those two kind of go together. It's communities of belonging.
Yeah.
For me, I mean, Nicole, I was 30 years old. I was working with Jill Havely. She and I were at Hewitt Associates together. I had more professional success than I could ever have imagined, as you mentioned, coming from the crap that the journey that I came from.
So you went through it though.
But I went through it, and then all of a sudden I'm 30 years old, and I'm sitting there and I'm looking around. I'm like, what is missing? And it's because I was friendly with everyone and friends with no one.
Yeah, I heard you say that before, and I was like, wow.
Mm-hmm. Right, and that feeling of belonging, I actually didn't even know what it felt like. Now I do, and
But did you want to be friends with people? That's what I was curious about.
I didn't until then. Then. So, like throughout.
But why? I know you're supposed to be asking me the questions. I'm sorry.
I'm gonna get you. Because I still felt like something was missing from my life, and it wasn't. I was independent at that point. I was healthy at that point. I had no desire to be in an intimate relationship, so that had no bearing in my world. And I was like, well, look at them. I mean, they're over there and they seem to have a lot in common, and look at them over there, and they're talking about things outside of work. Like, they know each other in a way that's not just work related. And I felt like a gap. I felt like, wait, I want that. I actually want that. And what I figured out is I had to create it. It wasn't just going to happen on magically. I was going to all of a sudden belong somewhere. And so I created friendships with 5 women that are still, to this day, an incredible part of my journey. So now here's the thing. I think we all know what it feels like to not belong. Also acknowledging that some of us have a greater sense of what that feels like than others. What does it feel like to not belong? And then I'm going to flip it to, what does it feel like to belong? But what does it feel like not to belong? And what's your perspective on creating that sense of belonging?
Okay. Well, I think, and I have, I work in a male dominated industry, and, prior to moving into this space that I'm in now, which is diversity, equity, and inclusion, I was often the only, in so many cases, the only woman, the only Black person. And until maybe 7 or 8 years ago, I had a lot of people. Well, I had people that were on my team. Well, even now though, but in terms of the age gap too, because again, it was a traditional environment. So in terms, and I say traditional in the sense that, I'm not going to go into this, but in terms of the jobs that are in this corporate environment weren't for people like me. Right. I've heard the saying, you got to see it to be it. And you rarely saw people like me in those positions and of respect and power, honestly. Right. So to feel like you don't belong can be extremely lonely and empty. And so you a lot of times you go to the survival mode, and you end up having your work life and then your personal life, and never should the two cross. And that's why I went to like the traditional thinking, because I was watching. I've been watching. I think we all binge watch Netflix and chill a little too much. But anyway, I was watching a documentary recently about work and what is work. That's pretty much facilitated by former President Obama. And I'm not done with it. But I got intrigued about it because he is essentially interviewing people from service industries all the way to the C suite of different organizations, and understand and trying to understand what has worked to them and what motivates them. And I think, when I was going, like, in my early part of my career, people had me by 30 years with the organization, and they would say things to me. Like, I'd ask a lot of questions, as young people tend to do. And never would I really take the we do it this way because we always have done it this way. But that doesn't make it make sense. It's kind of
Exactly.
what I was
Right.
like. So no, I think it's extremely empty and lonely. And not to say you have to be this extreme extroverted person, but if you don't feel supported, and if you don't feel like you matter, or you're not seen, or you're not respected, that could be extremely lonely
Hmm.
and just unfulfilling.
There are times when, if I'm facilitating this type of dialogue with a workshop with teams, I'll ask people, and I ask myself this, so we know what it feels like to not belong.
Mm-hmm.
You write down a name of somebody that is in your world that you think might not feel like they belong. Like put a picture to that.
Mm-hmm.
Put a name to that. Put realness to that. And then what are you going to do to try to help create that? So I think
I
about
love
that
that.
because
I
you're
love
so
that.
practical and the things
Mhm.
that you do with your team to create those results. So how does it feel to belong?
Amazing. So I'll and shout out to my current peers and the senior leadership team that I'm a part of, because I often refer to myself as an HR transplant, because it's not a space that I've worked in like my entire career or such, right? But they embraced me right away. And and a lot of times, to your point, you have to build that community. You have to build. Now, let me say that I did know a few of the leaders prior to joining the organization, from working with them over the years, but not in a direct, not directly together. But I think, when you it's not easy. The work's not easy. This work is definitely not easy in terms of creating a more diverse, equitable, and inclusive environment, both internally and for our external stakeholders. This is probably by far the most challenging work I've ever done. Because again, you're having to continue to reinvent. You're having to be more aware of what's going on the outside world than you really want to know. But anyway, I think that because I have such a strong community, that is what keeps me going. Now, and that's what makes me want to create community for people in our organization, and to continue to build so we can understand each other, our differences, our similarities, because, and hopefully it's okay. Your editor can cut this out if you think it's
Mhm.
necessary. But when I first got in this space, I was like, what's important for people? Because people don't want to talk about, and again, this is pre-COVID, when you can
Yeah.
really more openly talk about, the LGBTQ plus community. You could openly talk about race. None of that was on the table really to talk about. I mean, we had at the time, I think we had 7 employee resource groups, and they were at varying levels of engagement. And leaders wanted to make great community for our organization. We have 8 now. Yet certain things within their communities were not up for discussion, honestly. Like, people just, I don't know, they just really didn't want to talk about it. And that's a lot of people pre-COVID, right? Yet what we were able to do during COVID, when everyone needed community, was to create that community and that sense of belonging. This is not just for our corporate employees, but people that have been working remote prior to, our manufacturing employees, our employees in our parts distribution centers. And so with that, going back to when I first started, I said, If people could just stop being assholes, we live in a much better world. Because
I embrace that. I might use it instead of love. And I might get a better reception than, no, we don't want to talk about this love thing. Keep going, but right?
I mean, seriously, like if you start realizing your reality is different than mine and vice versa.
Yes.
And at the end of the day, because I was talking, so I mentioned so we have 8 employee resource groups. I was talking to one of the leaders recently, like this is a while back, and he was like, "Our people want this, 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 this." I said, "You realize that other people want that too, even if they're not a part of your community." Mm-hmm. And he had to pause because, just simple human things like, I want my children to have a great education. I want to be successful. I want that. That's not specific to your community. That's specific to humanity. So I do, and I got kind of going off a little bit, but I think when you feel like you belong, you could have those types of conversations with people, and you could show up and be your authentic self, and you could feel like I'm being heard, seen, and respected. And I'm a part of and we have great team spirit, and I'm a part of something bigger, as I mentioned before, because it is, of course we want to, at the end of the day, make great products, and without customers, we don't have a company yet. For those who does that is the people in the organization. So whether you're the person, I love what you said about, if you feel there's someone who doesn't feel like they belong, write their name down and figure out how you can help them to feel that way. Because some people just want to be left alone too.
Yeah, right.
And really, some people are perfectly fine with that. And you need to be fine. We need to be fine with that too. You can't, just because someone is not like you doesn't mean that there's something wrong with them.
Right.
We have to respect people's differences in addition, and we respect their differences, but we can also respect where we have our common needs and goals.
I love that. And I one thing that you said a little bit ago, and I know I got to speed us up, but I just don't want to.
I'm like, I don't know how many episodes this is about to be.
That's okay. I break it out into chapters too. So we'll have the full episode, break it out into chapters. So everybody just keep coming along with us. When you were talking about building trust, you made a comment about when you were younger, you would ask a lot of questions like younger people do.
I still do.
See, exactly. And that is one of the things that I've observed about you. And I think it's so important and so instrumental to, in order to respect people's differences, you got to first understand what the differences are. I'm not talking about surface level differences either. So there's surface level differences, but then what does that mean? What does that mean for somebody's life and culture and thinking and expression? And, and if you don't ask questions and if you don't listen, so stop being an asshole, show up with the intention of connecting, then we'll create a little bit of a better space.
Yeah. I've shifted from saying that, I just ask a lot of questions to something that I feel like is a little more sophisticated. I said I lead with curiosity and humility.
Love it.
So instead of saying I ask a lot of questions, I lead with curiosity and humility, because I do feel like it is, ignorance is bliss, right? And we're all ignorant in some capacity. Yet, if I want to know something, I do. I'm curious about so many things. I lead with curiosity and humility, because what other way is there to be honest with you?
Thank you for joining me for this episode of the Choose and Become interview series. To check out more episodes, go to www.trishkendall.com/podcast. Or go to any of your favorite podcast channels, including YouTube, under Trish Kendall Speaks, and you'll find this interview and more. Choose and become.